So, to my great joy, 2/3 of the questions are about V0 and AI. So top question. What do you hope the coming ecosystem built on V0 will look like? Is there going to be an API?
Excellent question. So ever since we put out V0, it kind of became that demo that took blew everyone's minds, I shall say, including mine. I remember when we were building it, one of the things we were incredibly surprised by was just how good AI was at creating user interfaces, period. Just how good the AI was at Tailwind in writing React components was mesmerizing. So from that idea of just how good AI is at creating user interfaces, we're like, okay, let's create an AI native product to completely automate that process. And as soon as we put it out, obviously knowing that we have a developer user base, I should have known this and anticipated this, people wanted to hack with it. The very first question we got was, number one, how do you build this? And number two, can I have an API? So on how we built this, it was awesome to kind of get that feedback because there was a lot of interest in our community in building AI native products. So specifically, people were blown away by this streaming capability that V0 had. Today, when you use the models that have the most reasoning power, they take a little bit of time to think, right? So they have to sort of stream token by token. They're most likely to be correct compared to other models, but they take more time. So we invested in this streaming rendering technology. We also got lucky that we were in the right time at the right place because we had been investing in React Server Components and streaming for a long time. So we combined React Server Components and models and the ability to generate UI, and then we open sourced it. So today you can grab the AI SDK, which Jared today talked about, and now you can build AI native products that have the same power as V0 to stream and generate UIs. So that's number one, and how you can sort of become a part of this V0 ecosystem and through the AI SDK. And the other part that we're excited about is extending an API potentially in the future to our developers, as well as connecting your design system to V0.
So because V0 has taken off so much, it is a today separate product, separate experience from Vercel. How do you think the future of hosting and front end plays out between these two things? Do they converge? Is it just magic AI in the end?
I think so. We have a lot of really good ideas on how they converge in a way that's tasteful and meaningful. I shall remind people that when we set out to do this project, one of our operating principles internally was no random acts of AI. Like no random acts of hugs of AI as well. So and this principle is super useful because AIs, again, are super powerful, and they can also produce a lot of junk. So we wanted to constrain the product to create really meaningful outputs, and we wanted to basically have our own internal scoreboard of quality based on how frequently developers and users are accepting these outputs and taking them with them. For example, by running the command, by copying and pasting the code, we're always listening to those signals of like the outputs we generate are useful and loved by people.
So you're saying they have the power to decide how much
exactly.
Of the experience it becomes.
By basically continuing to thumbs up and acquire the outputs, they're basically reinforcing our desire to do more with this product, right? And right now it's trending in a really positive way. So you can take this idea of generating UI and take it a step further, right? So I was just talking to an amazing partner of Vercel that has so many applications and so many UI components and a desire to create personalized experiences that they're kind of declaring bankruptcy on traditional software development. The desire of their customers for personalized user experiences is outpacing their software engineering capacity. So they're turning to generative UI to create more of the traditional, like I would call it like SaaS front-end experiences, which is looking at graphs, looking at recent data, recent activity, recommendations, and taking advantage of generative UI to sort of automate the orchestration of these components. So we want to do the same with Vercel. When you go to vercel.com, we should be anticipating what you need. I mean, why else do you go to a cloud dashboard console? You're probably thinking about diagnosing a problem. You want to get some insight about how your business is performing. You might want to optimize something. So AI is all about prediction. It's all about enabling better personalization. And it doesn't always have to look like a chatbot. That was another big point that Jared made today.
So one question I think a bunch of people had was, you guys ship something that's an AI native product very quickly. What advice do you have for development organizations, just how to think about this? Is it just going to take your job? Like, is it between the front end and AI? Like, we don't need developers anymore. How do we invest here?
Yeah, so number one, because I've been getting it on X a lot, I need to clarify it's not taking our jobs. I think it's taking a lot of tedious tasks away. So with V0 in particular, the way that I've always thought about front end is a process of translation. There's translation between a mockup, or there might be like literal translation of a set of pixels that someone has designed, and it has to be converted into front end. And it turns out, just like Google Translate is better at converting Argentinian Spanish into English than even myself, then AI ostensibly can convert from that idea that you have about your design into a working UI much better than a person can. So I think the potential is in, wow, that's cool, security. The idea is that you can convert much faster from that sort of concept into a working implementation, but you're still sort of steering the boat, right? You're running the operation yourself. You're definitely still, you have a job, and you just can do a lot more with it.
Yeah, I think one of my core beliefs here is that there's elastic demand for software engineering, right? Like, we can't really produce enough people who can create great front end, and so the tools just expand the number of software projects that get delivered that are of really high quality.
And transfer of skills too. We hear from a lot of people that, jokes aside, could really not center a div, and a lot of us, I think, are guilty of like what was the right flexbox, whatever CSS incantation to center a div. So the very first thing we did before we released V0 was, can you center a div? Okay, yeah, you have a job, you're hired. So for a lot of backend devs, just overcoming that first center div is a small step for that developer, a huge leap for mankind that can now reliably center divs. Why not? So yeah, a backend developer can now ship front end. How cool. And a front end developer can ship front end faster. So
the hard things in life, yes.
Yes.
It feels like actually app router questions have taken over on the leaderboard now, so we should talk about that. I think we had deprecation of pages router as one question, and then like what's next in app router?
Yeah, I don't like the word deprecation. There's so many incredible websites and applications that run so many of our online lives that are running on pages router. So I want to continue investing in making it secure, reliable, stable. So for example, when we decided to rewrite in Rust our compiler infrastructure for Next.js, from day one, we knew that we're going to support pages router because so many amazing teams are still depending on it and running huge, huge applications with it. So that, I think, dispels some of the fears around pages router maintenance. And similarly, I think when I think about the future of app router, that's the primary keyword, is stability, performance, developer experience. We have a hugely powerful foundation now. We have React Server Components. We just talked about how React Server Components enable streaming, enable AI native products. We don't need a major new architectural leapfrog here. We just need faster migrations if you're on pages router and you want to adopt app router. Funny enough, I'm going to say AI again. We need better AIs. So AIs need to learn more about app router, and we're making our contributions. We'll be sharing some details soon. So the ease of migration from one to the other, I think, is going to be a huge net positive for the community. We've made huge strides in documentation, but of course, there's still more investment going there in terms of understanding patterns. Recently, I tweeted about, it's a simple thing, but on Vercel, and this actually is a pattern I see with a lot of very large e-commerce websites, the navigation logic, the core part of the layout, becomes incredibly complex over time. You just add more data, more instrumentation. We have a lot of feature flags that determine what experiences we're going to suggest and render. So when it was client rendered and sort of SPA heavy, it was taking multiple seconds to load every time it would go to our cloud dashboard. And when we moved it to App Router and React Server Components, it's now taking like 150 milliseconds. So sharing the stories of what are the right patterns, for example, for complex navigations with experiments, but also telling the stories of real ROI. It's not just about rewriting in the cool front-end framework of the week, but you have to be very convicted personally and with your teams about what it is that you're getting in return. And we've internally at least achieved and demonstrated that the wins in terms of performance are very, very significant. So we will continue to sort of share what those patterns are and educate the community on App Router. But again, make it faster, more stable, rewrite more in Rust, just kidding, the right amount. And yeah, no major changes.
This feels like a big jump between can't center a diff to rewrite in compiler in Rust,
yeah,
guys. I don't know. I feel like that was a big jump.
Yeah, that's
but no. Let's talk about that. Like, there are so many advantages to the app router. What wisdom do you have for teams that consider it in terms of the challenges or like getting it right at the beginning?
Yeah, I think the biggest piece of advice is the same thing that I advise with any software engineering project, which is there's two kinds of migrations, incremental ones and failed ones. I truly, truly believe that you have to strive to incrementally take your team, your project, your own users to the promised land. So number one thing I actually dog-fooded with our teams internally at Vercel was, let's move one entry point, one route, one page into the app router, and let's have those systems coexist. And this will be a pattern that you'll hear a lot about from Vercel. Anytime we think about a new technology, we ask ourselves, what is the incremental adoption path? So with App Router, my main piece of advice, make it incremental. And also test it. So you can get, from Vercel Speed Insights, you can get the telemetry. We know for a fact that when people send us their anonymized telemetry from their devices and their laptops, these experiences are faster. For really large merchants running on Vercel, this directly converts into money and better SEO. So those are the kind of things that I look for. Incremental, and then a really close watch on ROI.
He's saying to, what is it? Iterate to greatness?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, there we go.
Always.
And one last thing on this, in the transition, when people are making the decision, what's the biggest trigger to start investing? Like, pick a route. Is it performance on a particular route?
Personalization, by far. Mm-hmm. So Pages Router is great. I invented it. Just kidding. It actually is bad for that reason too. So it got us here. It got us here. It won't get us there, truly. So Pages Router was really easy. It has a hybrid dynamic and static rendering model with ISR that is quite good, but people actually want to be very granular in how they combine static and dynamic parts. And we're just talking about using AI to assemble personalized experiences. So no page is truly one or the other in absolute terms. And perhaps that was the greatest sin of Pages Router, is that it said, well, this page is server-side rendering with get server-side props, or static, or ISR, with get static props. And that's a false dichotomy to put the developer into and businesses into. However, it came with a pretty freaking great DX. If you're doing something really simple, or more like news, media, content heavy, you went to get static props. If you were building a dashboard or something extremely dynamic, strong consistency, fancy like database terms, you go to get server-side props. But again, the world is more complex than that. The world is about some components are static, some are dynamic. You need a really powerful caching system. You need tiered caching. So enter App Router. With changes that we've made to the defaults around caching, we're now doing this thing where like it's actually going to be just as easy, if not easier than Pages Router, but you get this progressive disclosure of complexity. if you're completely new to the system, it actually feels easy in the beginning. You just have to accept that React now defaults to being a server-first framework. And then it takes you into this journey of, oh, I can start caching different parts of this page. Oh, those cached parts of the page become part of my partial pre-rendering thing that gets sent close to the visitor. But we're never again putting you into this false dichotomy of all static or all dynamic. So to me, that's kind of the big thing, the big rock that we had to move in the transition from Pages Router to App Router.
But that's a war that's been going on for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, it's a tale as old as time. And I think at the end of the day, this is the foundation that sets us up for success for the next 20, 30 years, which is a long time, but it's bold.
False war, pages to App Router. I think it's getting cut off on the screen, but we have questions about the Next ecosystem, of course. So I think here's like a core one. It's a mature ecosystem. A lot of people use it. Who is Next.js best for?
Everybody, life, health, success.
Wealth, yeah.
Yeah, everything. So
AI, I need to be in that reel. Yeah.
Truly, I think it's about kind of the things that I outlined within the keynote. It's for people that care a lot about working backwards from the user experience. A lot of the concepts that we've introduced at Vercel, framework-defined infrastructure is a good example. Even the fact that we endeavor to make everything zero configuration, right? You don't have to configure a bundler. You don't have to configure the infrastructure. So it's about, if you desire to work backwards from having a great experience and making it really fast, then I'm convinced that Next.js will give you those tools. Now, you have to buy into a certain things. Like, of course, you have to buy into React and React Server Components and some of the opinions that Next.js has made for you. But those are balanced with a lot of power in the framework. I just talked about you can model very complex dynamic applications. You can also model very statically cached applications. And now you can model sort of the holy grail of the in-between, the messy in-between, so to speak. So from the perspective of what the framework is capable of doing, it's extremely powerful. The thing that is our responsibility is to continue to make it really easy to use, lower the barrier to entry. I think the other thing that's making it really exciting for me personally is that we're so ambitious about V0 helping you write Next.js applications faster and easier. And we have also ambitions to make V0 more agnostic over time. In fact, today it has a little tab where you can just get the HTML output if you don't use React. But yeah, it helps a lot. But the reality is that Next.js will also come with this benefit of we're very AI-pilled, and we think AI will help you with your jobs a lot.
So you don't feel Next out of the box is better for, let's say, an e-commerce application versus a client-side application like a dashboard or something?
Yeah, this is starting to enter into like tabs versus spaces versus compiler versus transpiler territory. I am of the opinion that those labels are sometimes not super helpful. E-commerce can mean I talk to merchants that ship one product. Their entire company is one product. We have a great customer called AG1. They just have one product. And a lot of their complexity is actually in the relationship with the customer, personalizing the experience when you come back and you have to manage your subscription and you're a returning customer. And a lot of them is about the brand value and communicating with rich content the benefits of their product. And then you have customers that have billions of products in inventory. And their challenge is actually because they have so much complexity in the types of products that they sell, they have to create different discovery experiences for large clusters of products. It's like they have a big website that has children websites inside. So I've seen Next.js be able to do both jobs wonderfully, but I don't think e-commerce is helpful in like you navigating that conceptual maze, so to speak. So, and again, what is e-commerce? Well, it's just a website that optimizes for rendering really fast, which is associated with conversion. Typically, it involves personalization. Logged in experiences for e-commerce are mattering more and more and more. When I meet with prospects, the very first thing they talk about is, well, my website is so cached at the edge that we don't even remember who the visitor was, and we can't make recommendations. And if you think about that, that's kind of the same problem that people have typically with what you would call like SaaS dashboards, is that you return to it and everything is personalized because you're logged in. So I think the power of the web at its best is that we're not pigeonholing us into the whole, like, I think a lot of the sentiment that has come out of the limitations that you get with the web with Apple is that the web is only good for documents. And that we have to sandbox the web. I've always had this perspective, the web is extremely versatile. It can have pieces of it that are documents. It can have pieces of it that are dynamic generative UIs that far exceed the capabilities of a native app. And that's the kind of web that I want to empower with Next.js and Vercel.
Okay, so on this topic, you've been betting on the web for essentially your whole career. When you look forward, like, what is next in web development that you think people don't really see coming yet?
I think the biggest thing continues to be generative UI for me. The idea.
Can you explain what that is? Yeah.
Yeah. So I've been talking to folks that have come to the conference now that a lot of them have been using React for years and years and years. They have so many React components in their code base that their biggest obstacle, as I mentioned earlier, is how can I get out new experiences, new applications? The bottleneck becomes software production. One of our partners told me they have this customer that the ideas that they have exceed their ability to produce software for this customer. The bottleneck.
That's true of everyone, right?
Yeah, I think
That's called being an
what's
engineer.
interesting about this one is that it's a non-traditional tech native. I think when I talk to tech native folks, we all have ideas. There's a lot of idea guys out there, and we're like on X, we're terminally online, or like ideas. But I think for more traditional businesses, now they're finding themselves reinventing themselves with technology, and they have to get pretty darn creative. So the web today, in some ways, the traditional software engineering approach, in some ways has failed, right? Like the web is just not satisfying. There's a subset of it that is awesome. Hopefully some of those are on Vercel. But the web is freaking huge, and it's largely dominated by legacy software. You can come out with new technologies, but you're still kind of getting a little bit of the top of the iceberg of what you call now modern software. So the more ambitious view, I think, is how can we go after the entire freaking thing? How can we modernize all software, period? And I think the web is extremely well positioned there. The web is so dynamic. The deployment model is something I always think about because I mentioned there's a subset of software that has legitimately awesome experiences. It turns out a lot of those are apps you download. I'm not going to dispute that we might have opinions about the addictiveness of Instagram or TikTok or whatever, but they're legitimately good pieces of software. And that's why they're so engaging, right? And a lot of what we preach is meet them or match them in terms of performance, and you'll get similarly good performing businesses. But that took a very concerted effort, a very large software engineering budget, a team of specialists in crafting those experiences. And that's still a tiny percentage of all software. So how can we make all software awesome? The only path has to be generative UI, which is AI's outputting software on demand. And I mentioned the deployment model. Apple's still taking weeks to review your software applications. I just talked to a customer that went viral with a React Native app on the App Store, and they saturated their 10,000 test flight limit. Oh, you can only give it to 10,000 people. Otherwise, sit down and apply for your software license for the next 2 months kind of thing. So with generative UI, we have the potential to completely rethink and revolutionize the deployment model. Any idea that I have can be converted and streamed into every software surface in the world instantaneously. So it allows us to leapfrog every deployment mechanism that exists today. It makes the web 100 times better, not like mildly better than their competitors. And it gives us a path to modernize all that pile of legacy junk that I talked about. Because now we can go from data to generative UI and short circuit a lot of that messy middle of traditional software engineering.
Yeah, this is a really interesting idea because when you say that software engineering has failed to some degree. What I'm hearing is that like it's too expensive in terms of quality and size of engineering team you've needed to date to deliver like a great experience.
Correct.
And like AI is actually an opportunity to go from 1% of web experiences are truly great to 90, very quickly.
And to reinvent yourself. I think the other thing is that you have to be able to be so quick on your feet to adapt to the world is changing so fast. So with generative UI, you have that opportunity to from one day to the next, without even releasing a new version of your application, you have the opportunity to steer the model towards a new outcome. And that's kind of what we want to enable with the AI SDK and V0.
Okay, that's a pretty futuristic view. One question we have is on the immediate roadmap, and I was really excited about seeing some of these things in the hackathon recently. Like, what can we picture coming next in V0?
Yeah, there's a number of, so we talked about feature flags today. So in terms of grounding myself back in the normal world, feature flags are awesome. They're part of that tried and true software engineering stack. It's part of our effort to continue to democratize what, Google, Facebook, all the greatest software development companies at scale have been able to do. One of their secret weapons has traditionally been that they launch everything as a feature flag and they build software with feature flags. So it's an incredible technology for agility. On one hand, you're de-risking what you build. I build it as a flag and I give it to the first row over here. And you all try it, you send me comments, and if you like it, I ship it, right? So I'm de-risking not shipping junk, as Steve Jobs said. This awesome quote, at Apple, they don't ship junk. So,
well, they do, but Canary Deploy solves that.
Exactly. So feature flag your junk before it goes out into the real world. And the other thing is that it de-risks the technology change because you're basically letting your consumers progressively try the new greenfield of software that you're creating. So you de-risk the iteration process, you de-risk the technology rollout. So why am I taking this detour? What's so rewarding about working at Vercel is we dogfood our own tools, so I get access to that beautiful toolbar, and I press the feature flags, and I can peek into the future of V0. So I'll tell you about a few feature flags.
Wait, so you're just running them all on.
Yeah, I see everything. So I'll tell you about a few feature flags that might or might not ship, right? So don't hold me to them. So that's the nature of building with flags. So number one is decoupling the process of generating a design system from generating UI with that design system. So today, you go to V0, a lot of people have trolled me on X that V0 just will make the entire world look like Vercel. Black, white, Chat-CN, and that's honestly not going to be the case. We started with that design system because we think black and white looks awesome, and the simplicity of that design system was going to make it broadly approachable, going back to not shipping random acts of AI. But we know it doesn't end there, right? Like, you want to customize it. You want to configure it to match your brand colors, your typefaces, your preferences around how much space you want between components, and so on and so forth. So we have this generative experience of the design system itself. So you can say, I want it, and I hopefully we're going to ship it with this on, I want it to look like Windows 95. And we'll give you Windows 95. And then all your generations are Windows 95 look. So how awesome is that? Okay, so that's one. And in practice, of course, you're not going to use Windows 95, but I've seen some pretty cool design systems generated with it. And again, that kind of solves that problem of like, is the world all Chat-CN? Yes, but it doesn't all look like Chat-CN. The other thing that's extremely exciting, and we've demoed a few times now, is the ability to import a design system that is not Chat-CN, and it already exists. And this is informing a lot of our development into what we call remote or federated React Server components, which is the ability to stitch together UIs that have distinct internet origins and federate them in and coalesce them into one experience. So you could imagine V0 grabbing your existing components from a secure remote endpoint and then generating with those. That's another one. The other one is our ambitions for V0 are not just on text UI, text UI, text UI. V0 is all about being the best possible assistant for front-end problems, period. So behind closed doors, you had an interesting question about, like, is Vercel an AI company? Is our AI effort just limited to V0? And our aspiration is that we use AI, of course, wherever it makes sense and it's safe to do so, into a lot of our products. So you could imagine a very common source of heartburn is you push to Vercel and you have something is slightly off. Like your PNPM log file is outdated or doesn't match or whatever. Have you ever seen the meme types of headaches? Like the red head? So you also have a minor TypeScript error. You literally forgot to save the last little fix you made before you pushed. All of those things, Vercel just auto-fix for you. So you're going to see V0 sort of infuse itself. I don't know what V0 looks like as a person, but imagine them infusing themselves into like everything that you're working on. And I think a lot of that will have to do with auto-fixing and migrations and those kinds of tedious tasks that we all face day to day.
I have a very serious question from the audience that I don't know made it into the rankings. Is Shadcn real?
Yes. I've met them twice.
They look like the personified version of V0, though.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. And actually, a feature flag that has not been built.
How is this a feature flag question?
Yeah, so it's all feature flags. A feature flag that has not been built is, right now we give you 2 generation modes, speed and quality. We have thought about having speed and Shadcn. And what would Shadcn do? We're already generating Shadcn. So what it would do is it would get dispatched to Shadcn's desk. So it would be a very high cost generation that gets custom tailored by Shadcn, the one and only, and then perhaps, has some implications to your own design system in the future. But yeah, totally real.
Okay, so we were talking about, is Vercel an AI company? You're obviously shipping AI products. Maybe you could just describe like what you think the advantage Vercel has here, besides like the web is such a like hugely important canvas for it.
Yeah, so let's just stress out that one. ChatGPT is the most successful product of recent times, and it's a website. Of course, they have a native app now, but their ability to iterate quickly and get into the zeitgeist of everybody's web browsers is really what's allowed AI to be as relevant as it is today. So the web continues to be, in my mind, the perfect medium for AI. The other advantage kind of relates to the tools that AI is really good at, right? So I mentioned AI happens to be really, really good at local reasoning. So if you're generating something, the collocation of HTML, React, and Tailwind is something that modern models are really, really good at.
Oh my God, it's already in one container.
Yes, there's just all in there. So it turns out that AIs are really, really, really good at this task of helping front-end engineers, and we want to make it better, of course. So that's, I think, another really awesome intrinsic advantage. The other one has to do with, again, like evolving complex systems, like mature web applications. When I talk about personalization, I mentioned earlier, like a huge driver for App Router adoption is personalization. Realistically, personalization is still pretty hard. It's like everyone wants it, and very few companies are actually nailing it. So when I think about personalization, I sometimes go to an Amazon product page, and then it says, people also buy, or things that they know about myself. I end up buying 20 things when I enter to buy, I don't know, a replacement for a shower head. So I leave with a car, because they know me so well. So I don't know if they sell cars, but it would be fun.
But you'll see, there's 20 items.
Yeah, so personalization at scale is what every website proprietor wants, and yet still very, very hard to attain. And I think combining AI and App Router will finally help us deliver on this holy grail of the web at its best. The web at its best is not static. It's not every single visitor gets the same cached copy of a page. It's a web that's literally just for you in the moment, and it has advantages both for visitors and businesses. Visitors want content that matters to them. Honestly, like the worst thing about some of the changes that happen to ads on iOS is that you still get ads, but they're junk. They're things that are completely irrelevant to you. So getting you content that you want is a great thing, and I think, again, AI and the web are sort of the perfect medium to deliver on that personalization dream.
So I had a developer ask me today how to think about the security of all this AI stuff. Vercel is a very secured by default company, very focused like infrastructure and security team. But all of the AI features around personalization, they are non-deterministic. It's scary for people.
Yep.
So how do you guys think about addressing this internally, and what do you tell customers?
Yeah, one subtle thing that's really, really cool about the AI SDK with React Server Components is that it really helps mitigate, if not eliminate, the hallucination problem. So when you think about a React Server component, what is it? It's some JSX, you write some data fetching code, and then you return UI. And the UI can actually be text, right? It can be a text fragment, a JSX node that has no markup. Why would you do this? Well, the reason you would do this is that instead of having the AI go nuts and get data from its training set, which is a lossy compression of what it was trained on, then it can actually be augmented very easily while it's converted through function calls into your React components. So in a kind of like, if you squint, RSC is helping you fix the hallucination problem because you get prompt, function call, and then you augment it with data coming from the React Server component, and if you want, UI. But actually, the funny thing here is that this AI SDK with React Server components is a great model, even if all you wanted to do was just render text, because then you would be able to augment it with real data. So the classic example that we give is the model doesn't know what the weather is, but I can make it call a function, get weather. And then I can convert it into the weather component. And the weather component might return text or might return UI. It's as simple as that. So to me, that's kind of like the magical thing that this AI SDK is enabling. So why would a developer want to use that? I think it's pretty self-evident in the developer experience. And going back to risks and security, it's the mitigation of hallucination and full control over the data. Now, with the AI SDK design, we are very intentional that you register the method calls and you register your components. So there's no scenario in which V0 says, oh my God, I'm going to render a component that has nothing to do. I'm going to render a Tetris game for this e-commerce website. So that cannot happen. On the V0 side, we've invested in some really cool technologies for sandboxing and isolation, and a lot of model steering such that it doesn't do things that it's not supposed to do, but it's a secure environment. So we're very free to generate very arbitrary UI. Oh, I forgot a really cool feature flag that I just got flagged into. It's like a meme now. So V0 will soon be able to generate client component code. So it can write use a state, use effect. It can model interaction, especially pretty complex interaction. Like for example, it can create trivial games already. And the technology that went into making that secure is pretty freaking cool. But again, we had to work within those constraints of like, the AI is writing code that now is going to get hydrated. So anytime you're dealing with AI, just like when you're dealing with PII and customer data, you have to be paranoid. And you have to have a sound security model around it.
So last 5 seconds, maybe we'll give you 20 seconds. What one takeaway do you want everybody to have from Vercel Ship?
You called it out, iterative greatness. We're never done. We love your feedback. We got incredible feedback yesterday from our customer advisory board and partner advisory board. And everybody here, just want to hear your feedback. DM me on X, however you want to deliver it.
Reinforce this team with your future.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we'll respond and improve and iterate. We might ship a feature flag or two. Just needed to get that in as a response to your feedback. So keep it coming.
Okay. Thanks so much, everybody. Happy hour.